Hello everyone, welcome to the video. I wanted to build a PC that would help me with video editing and photography, and my laptop was not doing it. I have the Samsung Galaxy Book Pro 360, some really long name. It's got an Intel 1165 G7 processor, and that thing is just terrible for video editing. I don't care what anyone says, that thing is garbage. The budget I have for this project was under $500. I also didn't have anything like a monitor, a keyboard, and a mouse, so all of the peripherals were gonna be in the total cost as well. As usual, I went on my favorite site, eBay, and I started looking for parts. The GPU had to be somewhat decent for this, and I have been seeing on YouTube that creators were recommending the R7 360, which for me is too low quality of a GPU, and it only has 2 gigabytes of video memory. And I remember my GTX 660 from 2012, that thing had 2 gigabytes of video memory, and I just wanted something a little bit more up to date. On eBay, I saw this one listing for the GTX 1060 for $60. Not terrible, but I felt like I could get it for a better price. And I talked down the owner, and I made several offers for $40, and I got it. Always stand by what you offer. Don't change or up the price. If you aren't getting what you're looking for, look somewhere else. It's totally okay. The card wasn't in the best condition when I got it, but when I was using it with DaVinci and some other software that I have, it seemed to be performing pretty well, so I can't complain. And by the way, this is the 6 gigabyte version of the card. So now that I got a really good GPU, I wanted to decide what CPU I wanted and whether I was gonna go with Intel or AMD. At first, I was quite settled on the 12th gen i3 12100F, given that the price for it was around $90 brand new, but it only had 4 cores. Now it does have 8 threads, but threads aren't as powerful as cores, and for video editing, I find that around 8 cores is the sweet spot, at least for what I do. Editing H.264 4K codecs, compressed codecs are pretty hard, so I find around 8 cores that gives you the best result. On the other hand, I had found the Ryzen 7 3700X on eBay for around a similar price, $90 to $100. And I think this actually might be the better way to go, because I think the Ryzen processors are just better for video editing in my experience. The only problem is that I was going to be getting it used and not brand new. I was able to talk the seller down to $85, not a bad price. And the cheapest motherboard that I could find that was compatible with the AM4 socket was the Asus Prime B450M A2, $74.99 brand new, and after tax, that was $80.24. I don't know why I emphasized the cents like that, but whatever. Of course, I need the thermal paste, and I found the Arctic MX4 thermal compound for $695, and after the good old stuff, it was $744. I went and found a heatsink for $20.69, which probably was too cheap, but I was curious to see how it was going to perform. And after tax, $22.14. The heatsink is called Vetroo V5 ARGB CPU cooler computer case PC heatsink 5 Heatpipes LGA 1200 AMD AM4 yada yada yada. Nice that it is compatible with Intel and AMD. Now supposedly it had some nice RGB color output, but I couldn't get it to work because the motherboard did not support the RGB 3-pin input. By the way, you never want to mix pins together, like getting converters. If you find something on Newegg or something like that, don't ever try to convert the pins. For instance, if it's 3-pin, you're trying to put it into a 4-pin, do not do that. Vice versa, putting it in the other way, because the voltage is different. 4 pins means it has 12 volts, and the 3 pins is the ARGB and it has 5 volts. There are 2 different voltages, so you never want to mix the connections because you'll damage your hardware that way. Cheapest RAM I could find was the Kingston HyperX 2x8 gigabyte sticks. Total amount is 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM. The order for this was $26.74. Again, I do not recommend buying cheap RAM. This can cause issues with your hardware and your operating system. But I'll be making a future video on how this PC actually performed. Again, cheap RAM can run into a lot of issues. The SSD I chose was the Kingchuxing, I'm sorry, 256 gigabytes, and it was $1807 I paid for this. And I mean, it's typical for this price, but for this type of SSD performance, I don't think it was worth it. I don't think I got a good deal out of this. I was probably better off going to a Best Buy and getting like a actual well-known brand, but I took the L on this one because I didn't feel like going out. I wasn't sure if the motherboard was gonna come with any SATA cables, so I went and bought an 18-inch SATA cable for $3.09. Not bad. Now, good news, I reached into my backpack and I actually found a Logitech wireless mouse, so I did not need to purchase a mouse. But I still needed to purchase a keyboard. To be honest, I don't care about how cool looking the computer is, I just need the thing to work. But I still needed a case, and laying all the parts out on the table and trying to turn it on that way, it just looks kind of weird. I was like, all right, I guess I gotta buy a case, don't I? The cheapest case I could find on the internet was on Newegg for a total of $51.35. I think that was kind of expensive because when I got this thing in the mail, it was very flimsy. It feels like it's gonna break. It's not really that durable. It's by Sama, however you call it. I think around $30 it would have been reasonable for this case. Only because of the build quality. The fans look cool, really cool colors. You know, it's got a weird SD card, I'm messing up all over the place today. SSD expansion slot. It's really weird, it's in a weird place. There's not much space in it, even though it's like, it's not the smallest case, but I wish it could have more functionality, especially for $50. And on eBay, the prices were horrible for used cases. Sleeper cases were going for anywhere from 50 to 100, 150. I think people were out of their minds for selling it for that price. The power supply I found on eBay was a Corsair TX650W power supply, and the total order on this was $21.40. And I can't complain, you know, but I just hope the thing still worked because it looked pretty bad when I got it. It looked like it's falling apart, but you know, what are you gonna do? As long as it powers up the motherboard, it's got the newer pin connector, it works, the thing works. But that is the big risk of buying used tech online, is that it could just arrive damaged or with some flaws and then you can't return it. That's the worst thing that can happen. But I still needed a monitor and a keyboard, and I went very cheap on this. I found the Dell E221H3B565,000. All those numbers. It's 22 inch, good enough for what I need to do. Total was $37.44. I felt like I paid too much for this, but hey, it arrived in good working condition and it's working. But it's a shame that this 1080p monitor does not have an HDMI, but it does have a DVI-D connection, which is certainly better than the standard VGA cable. Then the keyboard. It was a $10 Vermeer slimline wired USB keyboard. Yeah, really nothing special here, but it honestly should be worth $5 if you ask me. So $10 I think we got ripped off, but that was the cheapest I could find. So the total with the Ryzen 7 3700X and the GTX 1060 6GB build was $427.46. Not bad, but the only issue was that when it arrived, it was not fitting into the socket, and I was building this live on my live streams. Shameless plug, go follow me on Kick. I like to talk about tech, all kinds of stuff. And I could not get it to just sit in the socket, and I could only think, bad pins. And so I pretended to be Bob the Builder and try to fix it, only making the problem worse. And so I went from maybe 1 to 2 pins that were damaged to now the whole thing's damaged. And worst thing was I actually broke a pin. You see, when you bend a pin, you can try to put it back in, but when the thing completely breaks, when it breaks off the processor, you have to try to solder it or try to get it to stick back on. I've seen weird techniques of people actually putting the pins in their motherboard, soldering the processor, and then putting it on there. It's too big of a hassle to try to do. I don't have all of those tools here, so I took the L and I lost the money that I spent on it, you know. But I promise the story gets better. I was able to resell it for parts for $35, so we got some cash back. But I mean, there's worse things that could happen in life. You know, I learned my lesson. Always check a used CPU before you get it to make sure it looks okay. Just take a look at it, take a picture of it, just in case. For once in my life, I wasn't cheap and I purchased the Ryzen 750-700X while I was crying because it's expensive for me. But it had 8 cores, 16 threads, it's an AM4 socket, base clock speed of 3.4 gigahertz, and the boost clock of up to 4.6 gigahertz. It's a very nice CPU speed. So unfortunately, I had to increase the budget, which now was $542.61. Good news is that if you already don't have any peripherals, like a keyboard, mouse, and a monitor, then the total amount would be $494.56. I think this is a very nice value, but let's see if it works. And indeed it works. I live streamed the whole process on my Kick channel to document what was going on. Unfortunately, this was a very difficult build in getting it to function, which I will talk about in the next video. Some of the hardware kept giving me errors and I had to find workarounds, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out why the computer was not turning on at times. And sometimes it would turn on and I'd get a black screen, but it would power on. Really stressful time with it, but I managed to get it working. And I haven't had any issues since, once I got everything working. Some say that I would have been better off with the pre-built system around this price, but I don't think so, not necessarily. So on Walmart, I found this Ipson gaming desktop PC, and it has a Ryzen 5 5600G, 6-core, 3.9, 1 terabyte SSD with 16 gigabytes of RAM, and it comes with Windows 11 Home. Now the processor isn't quite as fast, the clock speed is definitely lower as well, and this is without a dedicated GPU. According to CPU User Benchmark, the 5600X has 9% more performance than the 5600G. And adding $50 to what I paid for the GPU, the Walmart build would have been $528, still without a monitor, which I would need totaling $565. Maybe I was better off with the Walmart build, but I would have had to sacrifice the 2 extra cores and the CPU speed, which in my opinion help a lot for video editing. But I forgot to mention that the Walmart PC has the 1 terabyte M.2 NVMe SSD, which actually might still be cheaper than the build I did. I also would have had more storage. So was this the best budget PC for video editing? Maybe. The Ryzen 750-700X, it edits all my content just fine. Not gonna lie, I had purchased an i9 12900K, and I have to say that the performance is very comparable from this computer, and that build is very expensive. But I would also like to compare other processors around this price point and stuff that's cheaper, just to see how it would perform and if it would help me as well. But anyways, that's the video, everyone. Take your time in finding deals and let me know what you think down in the comments below, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.